I want to introduce first of all the gentleman who really got us started, put us on the map in terms of making this project possible by funding it. We ended up raising over $80,000, but the man who started that by giving us $25,000 to get us started was Hal Roback. He's from Toronto and he's here today. Hal, please. Oh, okay. Some logistics. The washrooms are just down the hall. They need a key, and I put the keys. They've got a hunk of wood fastened to them so that you don't stick them in your pocket and walk off with them. And they're just in this back room here on the desk just inside the door. I used to do a magazine called Affirming, and every time there was an issue, went to the printer and it came back. I'd spent 2 months working on it, but I still had to look at it in paper. And my wife told me that she invented a word for what I was doing. She called it gloating. It wasn't such a great word, but it stuck. So anyway, this is our time for gloating. This is our time to look at what we've done, and in getting to the point of having this center open, renovated, and staffed, and ready for operation. So, well done to all who were part of that. Most of them are in this room. Thank you so much. So, a little later I'm going to introduce the board, the members that are here, but first of all I'd like to invite the chair of the board, the National Board of CAFE, the Canadian Association for Equality. That's the organization that basically owns this project and this center. His name is Robert Samary. He's also here from Toronto today. Please, Robert, could you come up and say some words? Where did he go?
Is there a Robert?
Robert!
Do we have a Robert?
Is the washroom key missing?
Yes. All right, we might have taken a break. Patrick, would you like to?
Sure.
Okay, so our executive director, newly hired, just been on the job 1 month, is here, and I'd like him to say some words to you. Thank you. His name is Patrick Wright.
Yeah, so thanks, David, for the introduction. As you mentioned, and I think I've met a lot of you at this point, so I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Centre for Men and Families in Ottawa. So I work here full-time now, and we've only been open for a little over a month, and I've never seen it so full of people, so thank you all for coming today. It's really terrific to see all of the people here. I thought I'd begin by talking a little bit about myself, and again, I've met most of you, so I think it might be a little bit repetitive, but just bear with me. So originally I am from Ottawa. I grew up in the south end of the city, and I really love the city of Ottawa. I feel very fortunate and blessed now to be able to give back, provide a social service and work in this industry in a city that I love. I did my first degree here at the University of Ottawa. I did kinesiology, which was a very health-focused program. From there, I went to Halifax for a few years. I did my master's in health promotion at Dalhousie University, and it was a research-based program. So while I was there, I was doing research mostly focused on mental health. That was my area. And during my time there, I kind of realized that there was a lack of awareness of the relatively poor state of men's health, and not just from the mental health side, but also in terms of physical diseases and illnesses. So I became fairly passionate about promoting men's health. And at that point, that's when I became aware of CAFE and the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. So I haven't been involved for very long. But when I saw this opportunity, I was really excited to be able to work in programs and services directly tailored towards men and men's issues and men's health. So even though our centre in Ottawa is very new, a lot of work has been done already in terms of building a volunteer base. establishing relationships with other community organizations and social services, and planning our own programs and services that we're going to be running. Our vision is to be a hub for the health and well-being of men and their families, and we hope to be able to build on the success of the first center in Toronto and the programs and services that they offered there, and offer a lot of the similar ones here, while meeting the specific needs of the city of Ottawa and this community. So to finish off, creating the space couldn't have happened without the support of a lot of people. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the donors who have contributed to opening this center. Without the financial support, we wouldn't be able to have this space to work from, and we wouldn't be able to provide any programs and services. So for that, thank you, and we're extremely grateful. Of course, none of this would also be possible without the hard work of our own board of directors here in Ottawa, as well as the national board and all of the people from Toronto. A lot of work has gone into setting up this office and making it operational. So thank you to our own board, to Robert, Justin, all of the people from the national board and from Toronto that are here today. There's been already so much work that has been put into just establishing this center. As a nonprofit social service center, we're going to be very reliant on the ongoing support of volunteers. However, even in establishing the center, and beginning operations, we have had some incredible volunteers. John Kingsley, Sonia, and many others have contributed a lot already to the center. So thank you for that. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to offer anything. And it's very, very appreciated. And with that being said, I appreciate that you're all here today and that you're showing your support for the center. And I hope that as we grow, you will continue to support by donating or volunteering with us, even talking about the center, telling friends about it, sharing our website and our Facebook page, and talking to people about using our services, improving help seeking in men. All of that is needed to help build a place like this in Ottawa to help serve the community. I like to think of the CCMF as one piece of a larger social service puzzle. And to be able to do that, we're very reliant on you. So thank you for the support that you've shown us already, and thank you to those who will continue to be involved as we grow. I think I want to end on that note, but I'll say I am an easy person to get in contact with, so I would encourage any of you who have questions or comments, concerns, if you want to get involved, if you're interested in the CCMF in any way, to reach out to me, reach out to the center, and we'd be happy to appreciate any support we can get. So finally, again, thank you to all for being here, and we couldn't have done any of this without you. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Patrick. So, next I'd like to introduce Robert Samery, who is the chair of the National Board of CAFE, normally resident in Toronto. Robert?
When we started talking about opening a centre in Ottawa, it would have been not just the third centre that we have nationally, because Toronto has, of course, being the centre of the universe, the first centre that we opened. It's got a lot of services that we offer to men and boys. Calgary also has a centre that is not quite as robust and is not quite as formal, but certainly doesn't have its own space. The vision to open a centre in Ottawa was grand, and it was something that only an organization that has substance could try to think about and actually accomplish. So I didn't think that we were there yet. To have this centre open now, David, is absolutely fantastic. I thought I'd be happy to be here. I'm not happy. I'm ecstatic. I'm ecstatic for being able to have a centre for men and boys in the nation's capital, the flagship city of the nation, a place where men can come, a place where men and their families can come. It's a real testament to what everybody here in Ottawa is doing. We have a handful of people that started off 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, that began working on developing a place where men and boys could come and have some of their issues dealt with in ways that aren't dealt with anywhere else. You know, there are health issues, there are domestic violence issues, there are issues with the legal system, there are issues with the police system. All of those things really didn't matter because they were men and boys, and it didn't matter to them. Well, now there's a place, not just a concept, but there's a place where they can point to and say, I went there and they told me that I could be better at doing this, that I was able to accomplish these things, that you can't tell me that I have to listen to what she is saying. I can stand up for myself. So it's a place to do that now. And it's a phenomenal thing to have. We have a lot of support, not only in this community, but in many, many other communities throughout Canada. There are universities where the young students, and I call them young because I'm not there anymore, are able to now talk about these things openly. Sometimes they have pushback, sometimes they get shut down, but they talk about them together. This will be a hub to have Ottawa and the Ottawa region start to do that in the university, where our young kids can grow up in their families, develop their families in a way that's different, so that they don't have to suffer, that their kids don't have to suffer the sorts of things that men generally are suffering today. You started off with 5 or 6 individuals. I can name most of them. I'm going to forget some, so I apologize beforehand. But there's Victor, and there's Richard, and there's Meg, and there's John. David, of course, spending most of his time doing this, I'm sorry to say. I'm happy to say it as well at the same time. That's where it comes from. These people have given lots of time and energy. More people are coming on board, but that's the core. When the people that are coming on board become the core again, we'll grow and we'll multiply, and it'll be just a fantastic place to be. So thank you very much for having this center. Thank you very much for supporting it. If what you do is talk about this among your peers, among your friends, that's a terrific thing. There are people in this room that talk about it with a much broader audience than that. There are people here that do it on a professional basis from the work that they do to help the men and the boys in the center. But you guys are like the grassroots, and like any good movement, it starts in the grassroots, roots and develops. It spreads out from there. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. And thank you all.
Thank you, Robert. Robert mentioned the volunteer group here. I have to tell you, it's been, I mean, people say it's a privilege all the time, but I really feel privileged to work with this group of people who care so much about putting this together, making this happen. And this organization, I said it before, but I'll say it here again, it's the best I've ever been a member of, in terms of the integrity of the people, the focus, the vision, the tasks that we're setting ourselves. This is the real work of healing the world. This is the work that matters. That's how I feel about it. So I've been privileged to be a part of this. In Toronto, the centre that's been there for about 3 years now is run by a gentleman called Justin Trottier. And he is here with us today. I hope he's going to tell us something about how that centre developed, and you know, what the path that we might follow to do as well as they're doing. So please welcome Justin Trottier.
Thanks, David. And I wonder if maybe are there some more chairs in the other room we could bring out?
No room for them.
End up taking more space, I'm not sure. But if it makes sense to do so, I know there's some people trying to get it in the hallway.
Just a moment.
Yeah,
if we put chairs in that space there, we can get access by going through the back room and coming up the aisle. That was our original plan.
We don't standing.
We just want to roll some chairs out of the boardroom there.
Before I went into my prepared remarks, I think it's wonderful that we've spent the last several months building the space, and it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of people working together very closely over a long time period. And you're still happy with your organization, and you still think it's the best organization you've worked for. So that says something. I appreciate it.
Does say something.
Appreciate it. Indeed. I want to just echo what my colleagues have been saying and just start by thanking all of the donors who contributed to this project. And in particular, I do want to single out Hal, this is right here again, for being the catalyst in kicking this off. I'm going to use the word catalyst a few times, and I think it has an extended meaning. There are people here who have catalyzed this, and the organization itself, I think, is becoming a real catalyst in the community. So I want to thank Hal. I want to thank another fellow named Ray Van Enoch, who couldn't make it today, but also gave a significant amount in terms of financial support. And then, of course, many of you also VIP donors, signing up to the gala, the VIP rate. We really appreciate that. I know some people just have the capacity, they can give more than others, but I want you to know everybody who gives, it does make a difference, and it all does add up, and it added up to the point where we had to increase our goal a couple of times, and then we ended up making more than we had anticipated, even with that extended goal of 75,000. So again, I really want to thank you, because we were able to find a nicer space, we were able to find a space that's going to be more functional, we're going to be able to do so much more, and in other words, help more families, which is really what it comes down to because of your generosity. So thank you for doing that. Let me pick up on something Robert said about kind of not being sure if we could manage this. And I just want to add to that, we did all of this, not only did we do all of this, we did it in 10 months' time. I mean, I can't believe we did all of this in under a year. It was November of 2016 when the idea, the concept of a center in the capital kind of came up. And from that point on, we had to, first make sure that the local team was behind it. Obviously, that's where you start. And indeed, the resounding interest in having a center like this in the capital was overwhelming. And then we approached Hal, who's always been an amazing and generous supporter and philanthropist for the cause of men, boys, and fathers, and he was on board. And then we created a project plan, and we got some other leading donors. We did a crowdfunding campaign that many of you contributed to. We found a space. We found a great executive director who you've heard from, Patrick. We built a governance team. We furnished this place. It's looking beautiful. I mean, 10 months. I think most of you, if not all of you, had something to do with that. I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much. And if you didn't, you will, because we're going to get all of you on board for this. There's a lot of work still to do. The importance of Ottawa, as has been said already, cannot be overstated. We do have lots of things going on around the country, but it was always a priority for us that we have a space dedicated to this cause of men, boys, fathers, and families in the capital. And I think those of you who live in this political town don't need me to tell you that there are many issues confronting men, boys, fathers, and families where, let's just say, different governments might not always have an inclusive kind of mindset. I'm trying to be careful with my words here. I just think that there's a lot we can do to improve public policies and make them more inclusive, make sure nobody slips through the cracks, whether we're talking about policies around domestic violence, policies around families and family breakup, policies around health and mental health in particular. There's a lot of work to do, and this is a critical city to be doing it in. Not only will we be setting up, as we've already begun to do, programs and services to support the individuals in the communities in Ottawa, but also through our public policy and advocacy work, the footprint of this center is going to be felt all across the country, and so it's just so exciting that we're getting started here. I did mention catalyzing change, so let me talk a little bit more about the services. This is something I'm very familiar with from managing the Toronto Centre for Men and Families the last few years. And what we've noticed, and maybe this is going to run a little bit counter to what some people think, is that there's been a lot of inertia to get a Centre for Men and Families off the ground. But it's not because the people in the social service community or the people in government and public policy or the foundations that support these causes, these are not bad people. These are overwhelmingly good people. The problem is, and we're actually just having this conversation in the car ride over here, that everybody saw it as somebody else's job. The policymakers thought that they would get to it when there was enough public support and push and pull from the social service sector. Social service sector never has enough resources, money, and people to even do their mandate, let alone expand their mandate. So I think instead of kind of picking who to blame, what was really needed was somebody to come forward and champion this cause of men and boys. And that's been CAFE. And that's been the Center for Men and Families in Toronto, now in Ottawa, and in other places where we're setting up similar services. And what we've noticed is that once we do that, once we say, look, it's no longer acceptable to ignore these critical issues affecting men and boys, we are going to be the champions for men and boys, we find a lot of those people are very willing to contribute something, whether it's money, whether it's referring clients to us, whether it's co-hosting conferences with us, which is something we've been doing with some very prominent organizations in Toronto, whether it's just speaking out to the community on behalf of our organization, helping us establish credibility. We find that we can ask a lot from people and from organizations, and they're willing to do that, provided that we're there to catalyze that fundamental change. And that's been a very surprising, I should say, but a very pleasantly surprising development. I want to speak to why what's happening in Ottawa over the last 10 months or so is so important nationally. Let me talk a little bit in terms of where the organization is trying to go, because what we've been seeing over the last few months is as Ottawa gets off the ground, there is a healthy amount of envy, I think, from the rest of the CAFE family. Everybody wants to see a center in their backyard, and this is, I guess this is kind of a positive kind of NIMBYism, if you will. Edmonton, we have a branch there, they want to have a center. Calgary wants to have a center like this space. London, Ontario is working on it, and Jim and Darren are here from London, Ontario, and I know that they're very passionate about that. And I think Toronto and Ottawa, seeing that this can be done in multiple cities, multiple locations, has really galvanized this interest in every community needs to get on board to bring critical programs and services to the men and families, because these gaps, they're not unique to any one city. These gaps, we see them all over the country. The other thing that having a second center, second robust center like this has done, is it's forced our organization to undertake some very serious and some very significant governance and policy changes so that we can actually support multiple centers. And that might be a kind of boring thing for me to bring up, but it's really quite critical, because it's not just opening centers, it's also sustaining them, building the infrastructure. That's the financial side of things, that's the human resource side of things, that's also the governance and the policy side of things. And we've become a much more, I think, mature, sophisticated, and professional charitable organization as a result of having to go through some, I think, very positive upheavals in the way we do business. So I want to thank Ottawa for pulling us almost kicking and screaming through that process, but we've come out the other side, and David still enjoys the organization, so that's a very good thing. And then lastly, I just want to conclude by thanking the amazing team of volunteers. You've heard some of them named. Let me just, maybe by show of hands, I mean, who's involved in the, the governance board that we've created, or the executive team at CAFE Ottawa, or who's contributed in some other way? Just put your hands up if you've contributed in any kind of way to the organization as a volunteer. Yeah. So about half the room or so, and the other half is going to be recruited today to do that. And I guess the last thing I'll just say, again, back to my theme of being a catalyst. I mean, all of you really are catalysts for change. If the organization, if the agency, CAFE and Center for Men and Families, is catalyzing change in terms of the social service sector and the public policy sector, well, you folks are the individuals who catalyze us to make those changes happen, and to do it in a positive way, which is something I think is so important. Because you can do this in a negative way. You can do this in a way that backfires and that doesn't get you the kind of change that you want. But I think CAFE has taken a very different tact. We've taken a tact of being positive and being optimistic and being champions for change, and being willing to work with any individuals or groups that share that positive outlook, that they want to do something to improve the situation for boys, men, fathers, and families. So always stay positive. There will be challenges ahead. We know that is a part of what we do. But if we stay positive and we continue to grow this amazing team, and many of you are already on that team, then I think that the future is looking very, very bright. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Justin. Robert mentioned in his talk about that Toronto is the center of the universe. So I want to tell you a little bit about something that you probably don't see very much of, which is my role in the national organization. I'm on the board of CAFE. And I've developed something of a reputation, I know, for raising the word Toronto-centric into the organizational language, and fighting for the notion that CAFE would become a genuinely distributed organization and governed in a distributed way. I knew that I developed a reputation at the last board retreat about a month ago when Robert said something like, "We want to repeat what Toronto, Cafe Toronto, across the whole country." And Justin said, "Careful, David's in the room." So, we've got, as has been said, an amazing team, and I want to acknowledge that it's not just men who are doing this. This is for men and boys, but it's not just men who are driving this forward. It's women as well. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to hear from one of our female volunteers. So please welcome Meg. Okay.
Hi. Hi. So I'm going to do something a little unlike the other people. I'm going to use my phone for notes. I'm not much of a public speaker, but I do want to share a story with you. In my early 20s, I found myself in a very unhealthy relationship, and I didn't think I'd be able to get out of it. I felt stuck. And luckily, when I did go looking for help, everywhere I turned, I found programs and funding and all kinds of resources that were filled with messages of love and support for me as a woman. I felt valued and important, and I saw so many passionate people supporting me. And one of the most wonderful things that came out of that experience was that I started to realize my self-worth and that I wasn't alone. And I truly believe that this was instrumental in preventing me from going completely crazy and losing everything. And now I have a son and a daughter, and I tell them both that I love them and that they're important and that they matter in this world. But I started to wonder what society is telling them when I'm not there. And where do they go for help when I'm gone, or I can't be there? And obviously I answered that question very quickly when it applied to my daughter, because I had experienced it myself and I knew what was available. It was comforting to know that she had places to turn to for help. But when I looked for these same resources for my son, I saw that there was still a lot of work to be done. When I tried to imagine what it would have felt like for me so many years ago when I was stuck, if I had no one to turn to for help, I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency for that work to begin. I knew immediately that I wanted to help, and that I needed to help now. So I joined CAFE. Today, when I think about equality, and I think about when my kids grow up and leave home, I feel grateful that because of CAFE and the Center for Men and Families, there are now resources for both of them. And as we open our doors here in Ottawa, what we're doing is we're telling boys and men something that simply hasn't been said enough. You also matter. You are important. And we are all here passionately supporting you. And I'd like to thank you all for being here, to everyone who has donated their time or money or both. I thank you for saying this very important message with me. My son is here with me today, and he sees you, and he hears us, as will many others. So thank you very much. Keep up. He had an invitation from a friend, and he was like, "Oh, I want to see what this is all about." So thank you all for being here.
So that brings us to the end of our talks. We're going to have, there's some socializing, there's some snacks in the back room there, so please help yourself. Please do stay. I'm going to have questions in a moment. Please do stay and mix and meet. There's a lot of key people from the organization here today. I did say I was going to introduce the board. I don't know how many are here, but I'd like to do that. I'd like us to acknowledge the governing board, these people, all volunteers who have undertaken to manage this place, and that I think is no small thing. So please do, if you would stand. Any board members here? Or sexual abuse in their backgrounds. programs that are supportive and teaching around fathering after divorce, just general fathering support programs, that kind of thing. So that's
Do you have a schedule yet of any new events coming, or?
we have some. Talk to Patrick about.
Okay.
And do get onto our mailing list. How are we going to make that happen? I didn't think ahead about that. But we do have a mailing list for sectors.
I brought sign-up sheets.
Okay, excellent.
Where are you going to leave them for us? Sign up.
Good question.
Beside the
Wanna put them
donation
at the
box.
front here?
Beside the donation box.
Yeah.
Up at the front, yeah, how about that?
So please come and give us your email address, and we will let you know about upcoming programs, opportunities to volunteer, donate, etc.
I have a question.
Yes, okay.
Well, a question and a comment. I have noticed for a long time there is a backlash against programs that are trying to help men. For example, Oxiso, the immigrant organization, tried at some point to help men and rehabilitate them if there were situations of abuse. There was a strong backlash against the program. There are also women's organizations when they are told there is also a need to have that equality with programs for men. They said, no, there is little money for the program for women. We cannot afford to do that. And in my experience working with immigrant men, they don't have any clue of the consequences of violent behavior after they find themselves alone, with no children, with no wife, with no support in this country. So my question is mainly for the Toronto office, if they have been suffering some backlash, and also if they have been able to work in coordination with women's organizations so they understand that need.
Okay, Justin, can you speak to that?
Yeah, if I understood the question, I think it was about sort of anticipating backlash and working with women's groups to try to address it, kind of preemptively. I do have a really good answer, so I'm eager to get to the front and share with you. Because, I think this is one of our success stories. We have been very successful at forging relationships with a wide variety of organizations, hospitals, men's health clinics, well, health clinics in general, but certainly the ones that focus on men and trauma in particular, family mediation agencies,
Law enforcement.
victim service agencies, law enforcement, police, even RCMP to some extent. In terms of women's organizations, well, what I would say there is a number of prominent anti-violence against women groups that overwhelmingly focus on women. So they're either women's shelters themselves or they support women's shelters. They're not philosophically opposed to supporting men. It's just that, as I said earlier, they're kind of mandated to focus on women by sponsors or funding or whatever. But they've been very willing to work with us. And I mentioned we co-host conferences. It's with some of those organizations. There's a very prominent one, a national anti-abuse organization called the Center for Abuse Awareness. They approached us when we got off the ground and they said, we're so glad we finally have a credible, reputable place to send men who come to us as victims of violence. Because it happens more and more. This is what I'm told by their executive director. We've had lots of options for women. We haven't had any very good ones for men. And since that time, we've co-hosted these conferences together. They've actually helped us network with police and victim service agencies, which have then themselves gone on to support us by referring clients to us and providing us with other kinds of resources. So a lot of organizations do work with us, including organizations that are largely focused on women, but are very, very open to working with men's groups as well. Okay, so I think that's something that we can learn from, and some of the strategies we've used in Toronto I think would be applicable in other communities, and certainly that would include Ottawa as well. For me, or?
Yeah, for you.
I'll try to be quicker this time. Go ahead.
At the screening of The Red Pill last fall, was it last fall or last summer? There were a few police officers to make sure we were safe, but we had already been kicked out of the Mayfair Theatre.
Yes.
Do you know, or does Dave know, what group pushed us out of the Mayfair.
I don't think I mean, there were some people who were opposed, and in that case, they persuaded the Mayfair Theatre owners that their future sales were at risk. And so
Jay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, let me just kind of back up a little bit. I don't want to suggest that there isn't difficulties and challenges, but I think we need to put that into some context, because I think a lot of what we hear about in the media, and maybe even to some extent when we talk to each other, is we kind of focus on and play up the controversies, the provocations, and that's there. But I really want to encourage us to also be looking at responding positively when this stuff happens, and focusing on the fact, and this is to my answer to this lady's question, that in fact there's a lot of good stuff happening too, and a lot of good organizations that are very interested in doing more to support men and boys. And why don't we give them more attention? I mean, why don't we applaud them for doing that instead of giving more attention to those those increasingly dwindling minority of groups that seem to be just knee-jerk opposed to what we stand for. I think we just give them too much by focusing so much on them, when there's so many good things that are happening. I just gave you some examples of some of these networking opportunities, and there's a conference that we've been invited to just in the next week at Ryerson on men's health. You may know Ryerson actually has been an issue for us. We've had some challenges there, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the fact that there's this great conference around reducing stigmas in men's health, which our center has been invited to, and we're going to take that as an opportunity to work with those organizations behind that conference to try to do more at Ryerson and other campuses in and around Toronto.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk away now.
Yes.
Will Hickey, really happy to see the center open up. It's great to have more people in our community recognizing these issues. Kind of to speak to the last question, though, I understand there's definitely some vocal political components who oppose even the discussion of this thing, but more broadly, according to Statistics Canada, 93% of people paying child support are men. So when the very framework of our legal society has this, you want to go bias, I mean, that's, womb, like that's it. 93% of people paying child support are men. How can you only focus on the positive when there's this glaring elephant in the room that says men and women are not equal, men must pay? And I mean, there's consequences to that, right? It's not just like, all right, let me get my checkbook out and write some stuff up. Like that, a lot of men who may not be victims of violence, I mean, you hear it in the news every now and then, blow their heads off or hang themselves or something like that. They lose their businesses, and these are systemic issues supported.
Yeah, but let me give you my answer to that. What I do about that. I think that the situation is kind of a triage situation. There are things that we can't do very much about, so we don't do very much about them. There's very limited resources, and so it's really about how do we apply the very limited resources that we have. And my sense is, like Justin was saying, we're best to apply them where they're going to get the greatest return.
Mm-hmm.
And where they're going to get the greatest return is typically where there is the most positive support already. There just aren't enough resources for us to be saying, well, we've got everything we can do is already being done there, so let's look over here where it's more negative. We're not even in that situation yet.
Won't the numbers increase, though? I mean, that's like,
but
the divorce rate is increasing.
Well, I understand that,
yeah.
But that's like saying, the ocean is rising. What are you going to do about it? Well, you can't do anything
Build a dike.
about things that you can't do anything about. When you've got very limited resources,
right.
You say, the question is, how do I best apply them?
So am I correct in interpreting, saying that the problem's there, but there's just not enough support to really address those things?
Yes. What we're going to do is work where we think it'll have the very best return, and after that is done, if the resources grow, then we can do more.
Right.
Can I give a short answer?
Yeah. Robert, do you want to add to that?
Just very quickly, we live in a society that has a perspective on the things that you're talking about. It's a system. It doesn't matter where you enter the system will change as a result.
I don't understand.
It means that if we look at men's health, mm-hmm. and we focus on the vulnerability of men from a health perspective, eventually it will come around to changing that 93% statistic, because it's all part of the same issue, that men don't count.
Okay.
So essentially, with more and more media exposure to positive progress we're making, it'll balloon like a domino effect. So it's going to take time, but it can happen. It's worked with other groups, so it's going to work here. Plain and simple.
I have a partial suggestion for what you just raised. I have 8 books here for fathers who are going through custody battles. I've given this list to people in charge here. And I think the key issue in male-female relations is the one of custody. If you want a copy of this list, I've got it, and I've got some of the books with me.
Thank you.
My question, I've actually gone through some family law issues myself, and is there going to be any lobbying at all in the government to address certain issues and how they actually impact men? Because even though the system is getting better, there is lots of bias in place, there's definitely evidence of it, but and there's actually a whole business around it. And I'm wondering if there's any plans how to look at this and at least bring it to the attention of the public, so that way we can have a collective voice say this is a real issue.
Right, good question. So first of all, this organization right here is the Canadian Centre for Men and Families in Ottawa, is a service organization. So that's the focus. CAFE does advocacy. But there is something unique about what we want to do here. And that is,
there's a couple of buildings right nearby, Venue Francophone. They actually have a program there for, it's like a Dads and Me, and it's very, very popular. It's definitely something. This is wonderful, and I applaud you, and I want to support you, and you'll get a lot of support from people here in Venue as well.
I can speak
You'll
to
get
that.
plenty of clients too.
To any of that. And,
Okay.
yeah, they're very, they're into partnering with us in a number of ways. So just so you know, so I'm on the board. My name is Jean-Jacques Desgrandes, and so yes, I'm very likely going to be taking the French aspect. It'll start slowly. It can't be like tomorrow, but there will be but the services will be offered in both languages eventually. And if there's specific people who need service in French, I can probably come in and help with the program people and whatnot. And on that note, I also want to, Patrick has asked me, and I'm just, you know, when you need something, you give it to someone busy to make sure it's going to happen. But I've been too busy to answer him. But he's asked me if I was willing to start up a legal clinic here. And in fact, that will happen. And I can tell you right now, I will set up a legal clinic where we can go over certain legal aspects. But mostly, I think, around the procedure. The advocacy, I'm going to leave that to CAFE and to the other people. But it's mostly to help through the procedures, because I found that many times it's the procedures that kind of kill a lot of well-intentioned people. So keep an eye open, watch our website, and hopefully we can do something about that. And on a legal front, just to answer questions that were going on, I just came out of court in the last month twice, a month and a half twice. And both times I'm amazed at the change that there is in the courts for the last 2 or 3 years. The result I got, and I was representing a woman who wanted custody of her kids just lately. And she would not give custody to the mother alone. I was befuddled. I didn't understand, okay? There are changes happening in the court system. It's slow, but I can guarantee you I see things happening right now that I never thought I'd see happening in 2017. So keep an ear open on that as well, on the legal front.
That's great. We can get this thing to work.
Those are the top.
Yeah, looks good to me. Are we going to start cutting it? Fantastic.
Let's go.
Alright.
Good.
Alrighty. Here
Hold the ribbon.
Look up at me and smile. Look at the camera.
First time. I like it. Good job.
Well done, young sir.
I'm here for my sons.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm here for
Good stuff. Yeah.
Congratulations. Thank you. Good job, Dave.
Done with incredible efficiency. Notice how all of the pieces, every piece is equal.
Except whoever gets the stone, they'll have more.
So Patrick, you're taking that back piece there?
This is for me.
Everyone's equal,
Actually, yeah.
A piece of the cake for the future. I think that's a wonderful shot.